Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. Puddles and I are here in the Hyatt Regency Hotel here at McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois, with Mr. P, Dan Perantoni. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's great to really great to see you.
Thank you.
Hardly need an introduction for Mr. P. Obviously, professor of tuba at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and also member of Summit Brass and St. Louis Brass,
Right.
and the list goes on and on. Puddles actually has the list back at home, but it's so long he couldn't fit it into his suitcase.
Wow.
But what a great career,
Thank you.
and inspiration to countless people.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, Mr. P was a student, had studies with Arnold Jacobs, and I'm just wondering, Dan, what do you recall, what drew you to Jake initially?
Well, I was a very established player. However, I worked too hard, and I knew it. I needed to hear what he had to say. I took a job at Illinois, and really one of the reasons I took that job was the first teaching job there, actually second teaching one, and I took that job basically because it was close to Chicago, and I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity for me to really learn and be close to Jake, and I did do that, and it was one of the main reasons I took that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Arnold, Mr. Jacobs for, I remember his lessons just so vividly. He just made everything so easy. And what impressed me, obviously, is listening to his sound and his recordings, but what a gentleman and what knowledge he had. He got into the subject of breathing. Actually, he made me change from a very uptight player to a very efficient player. And now I went up there for several years, about 8 years, and one time he said, you don't have to come back. And I said, you're kidding? It's just nice to sit down with you. And so, not only that, socially, we used to go out and have dinner and other things too after that. But probably one of the most influential teachers I have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And I use many of the things that he taught me and pass on to my own students.
So you went to him being, I guess, fairly physically, with a lot of physical tension.
Yes,
is
I
what
did.
you're talking about.
Mhm.
What did he do to help alleviate that?
Well, the first thing he did is he explained, proper breathing. Obviously, he measured me on his machines. But one thing is just, hey, listen, do this, it's simple. One thing I do want to stress that he said that sticks in my mind even today is that, remember, everything I'm going to tell you is worthless unless your main goal is making music.
Right.
Okay, and I remember that. And another thing he said, Dan, always practice what made you good in the first place and never forget it. And I do that to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Those Bordoni etudes.
Right.
He also introduced me to a lot of melodies that I should be playing. Now, I also should tell you that my training was more in piano. I never had too many tuba lessons before that, until I went to Eastman and I studied with Donald Dobb, who I adore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had an opportunity to meet Harvey Phillips, which changed my life drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Arnold Jacobs. And so I think I had the best training of anybody there.
Yeah, you had.
But I was a pianist. I went to Eastman as a pianist.
Wow.
And then I took up the tuba. I actually auditioned on sousaphone and got in. So that's the way I went. So I was basically self-taught. And in those days, the old Italian, my dad being an Italian professor in a sense, everything had to be physical.
Sure.
If it didn't hurt, remember how that goes.
Yeah.
So.
So you were maybe just not, you were just doing like the maybe half a breath or something.
Yes.
And using a lot of.
Using a lot of tension. I mean, I also had a good sound, but never to the limit that I was capable of. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then also too, at that time in Illinois, it was a very contemporary school. All the people like Charles Warren and the composers of that name, Paul Zahn, Ed London. I could name what's his name, the famous. All those people were there writing music. John Cage, and I had to play all that stuff. And it was extremely high and very, very challenging. I used to bring it in rather than excerpts. I said, look what I have to do. And Mr. Jacobs says, my God, why don't you get an F tuba? And I'm like 28 years old at the time. F tuba? Yeah. I said, where do I get one? He said, got one right here. So that was my introduction to an F tuba, which today I guess I'm identified with because I do most of my playing on F
Yeah.
as a soloist. And that made life so much easier with those double high B flats and stuff
Right.
that I had to do, you know, and a lot of multiphonics and a lot of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that I took these works in and we worked on them together, and he had such an understanding of, you know, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? What are you trying to say here? You know,
Right.
so I didn't go into the excerpts that much with him, didn't have to.
Yeah. So he was really trying to direct you also then just from the mental aspect of music making and the message.
Absolutely, absolutely, always. That was the first goal.
Yeah.
You know, and then working on the breathing and things to make it good in the first place. You know, the suction without friction. I know all the nice little things that they
Right.
had, and he was such gifted at the English language. A lot of time I'd have to stop him and say, all right, can you put that a little simpler for me, please? You know how that
Right.
goes.
Yeah.
He'd smile like, oh, okay. Another thing that I remember about Mr. Jacobs is he always smiled. He was always pleasant, and he was always very positive.
Yeah. He was quite a gentleman.
Yeah, and that positive thing really stuck in my mind, and to this day, you know, I really try to imitate, as a teacher, a lot of things that Mr. Jacobs showed me.
I think he could really he could really inspire and motivate the student and get on the student in a unique way in terms of being positive.
Yes, always, and he also could reach you in a different, say for example, I come from a different background. He always would go into that background. We talked about, he was basically self-taught
Yeah,
too.
right.
And as I was, you know. Then he also liked jazz, so he used to come in,
Mhm.
hey, what do you got? What do you got? Bring in some of the jazz for me. So I would all the time bring
Yeah.
some in. Oh my goodness, you know. And then he always said, well, Dan, you should be playing in an orchestra, you know. And I studied a lot of the excerpts with him, and to this day I use a lot of that stuff for, you know, I had some experience in orchestra, and I took a couple auditions.
Sure. Yeah.
And then one day I says, well, listen, I'm taking a sabbatical. She said, you got a sabbatical? I said, yeah, I got a year off. I'm going to do this. Then he says, you know, maybe your job isn't too bad, you know. Just, and I'm glad I did that. You know,
Mhm.
and
That's great.
yeah. And he was involved with a lot of things that I was doing, a lot of new compositions that I had written, and I'd bring it into him and we'd go over them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Dan, you mentioned Jake's use of big words.
Yes.
And I know that certainly in my own research through this project, there was a period of time when he was getting into his medical research, and the medical words were flying, from the accounts of some of the other people I've talked to.
Right.
And then but he would always say, now, but forget about all that. I'm wondering, what did you notice in your period of study with him? What were the years that you were associated with him in the studio, and did you notice any of this, or any direction in his pedagogy, any evolution from the beginning of your time to your last?
Well, his goal was making you a complete musician, and I happen to play tuba, right? And so obviously the use of air was very, very, very important. And he directed me, like, remember, he would say, I says, okay, when you just take a breath, the magic word is expansion. Expand it from the lower abdominal area to include the rib cage. I still remember that like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Point B area is your glottis, is your oral cavity. That's going to be like a tube. Point C is your embouchure and beyond. It's like your vocal cords. Now, one of the things I find missing in all this research from people is that what he tells you is blowing from the lips.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I think that's the chapter that's missing in most of the books, and the most important. Students who take 2 or 3 lessons from Mr. Jacobs, they come back and they talk about the breathing aspect, but he was much more than that.
Right.
I mean, he was such a good, gifted musician in all areas, But that's one I noticed, and that blowing from the lips is stuff that really made sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And the vocal cords and the things of that nature. And, obviously got me into using being more efficient. I had to start playing extremely high for my job. Mm-hmm. And he gave me certain little exercises, which I call the popping exercise, where you start out in the middle register, which I call the cash register,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start slowly working up in scales and the like. Mm-hmm. And then pretty soon, you're playing 2 octaves, and then 3 octaves, and such and such. In other words, And also, he also told me something that sticks in my mind today. It's a matter of percentages. And the percentages being important is that as a tuba player, you want to go with where it sounds and where it was written for. And that's the majority of your practice, the Bordonis and things of that range, the Blažević, the Kupraš, all those things are extremely important if you keep in that range. Now, say, for example, as a solo player, I'm going to have to play a little bit high. You can't neglect that.
Right.
But you start off and you get your cash rate, you get that good sound, and then you're working into your higher register. Vice versa in a low register. If you don't have a low register, you got to get down there and practice.
Yeah.
The greater volume of air under less intensity.
Yeah.
And all those things made me, I think, a lot less physical. And at 72, I'm still playing, and this is a tribute to Mr. Jacobs and his age. I remember him sounding pretty good too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The whole blowing from the lips, I can't thank you enough for bringing that up, because I wholeheartedly agree. And I remember him talking about that, and just see if you agree with this. One of the main reasons for the blowing from the lips was to keep focus, your attention away from examining what's inside the body, but you can kind of sense what's going on at the lips.
I used to say it's like throwing a baseball. You throw a baseball, you throw it. If you think about everything it did to move your arm, you couldn't move it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that problem where they get into the physical type of thing, and it has to be a conditioned response like an athlete. If you start thinking about where's my tongue and all that, the brain sends signals down there, you forget to blow.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find that with your students too. One thing that Jake helped me with is my tonguing. I could always tongue like a snake, a single tongue. I couldn't double tongue.
Okay.
Never had to. Showed me in 2 minutes. But basically was to get my tongue a little bit lower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've discovered something that some people go like this with, is where do you tongue? If you tongue behind your upper teeth, you can't blow from your lips,
Right.
And so what we do, and with Jake this is, let's make a sound without the tongue. Now, assist that. Tongue moves up and down, not in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that I find that when I get into a lot of students who learn through their education classes, tongue behind your upper teeth, we have a problem there from day one. And it's easy to fix.
Mm-hmm. It is easy to fix.
And
Yeah,
I personally don't understand why it's not fixed for a lot of students.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I remember working on multiple tonguing also with Mr. Jacobs, and it was just first of all, let the sound be your guide.
Yeah.
Make it sound good, and if that means you have to start out slowly.
Well, and the faster you play, the more connected it becomes.
Yeah.
It's like in speaking fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then make sure you keep the air at the lips, not at the tongue.
At the lips, right.
Yeah. Wow, that's such great information.
Thank you.
To pass along. Thanks for that. I'm wondering also if you have any recollections, any good stories.
I have a dandy one time. Rudy Meinl here. Now that we're at the Midwest, right? So Rudy Meinl came in, and this is one of the first ones. We're talking about the late 60s, early 70s. And Jake and I went up to his room, and Rudy's famous for schnapps, right?
Yeah.
So we had several little schnapps, and actually, this was at the Hilton Hotel. So we're both walking out, and we got caught in that round door.
Oh.
And we're giggling like mad. Now, and he wanted to drive me home, and I only lived a block away,
Jake wanted to drive you home. Oh my goodness.
Anyway, that was one story. It was pretty good. It still sticks in my mind. And
Don't try that at home, young people.
Don't try that.
Or old
No,
people.
no. But that was fun. I had many good social events with Mr. Jacobs, because I had him down to Illinois quite a bit. And in that particular time in the 70s, they were using the Cranard Center. I was teaching in Illinois.
Yeah.
They did all the Mahler recordings there. So, and he came over to the house with my children and such, and he was such a delightful gentleman, he and his wife. So I got to know him personally a little bit better than I think a lot of people, and he was like a father to me.
I think.
I mean, to every one of us.
Many people would have.
And I
that
think of
same
him. When I think of him
connection,
today, all I do is smile.
Yeah. He was very great. Well, look, Dan, thank you again for taking the time. I know you're busy this week.
Oh,
here
this
in
is
Midwest.
this is an honor to be included.
I can't thank you enough. We have a gift for you, but I've already asked you about that, and you've said to please give that to a student. So we're going to find a student down at the Midwest convention.
And give it from me.
And we'll give it from you.
And I would love to have it, but
Yeah.
I'm carrying 3 tubas back in the car, and I'm going to have a
Exactly.
tucked up a room, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So,
yeah.
thank
So
you.
Puddles is very happy about that.
Thank
He
you,
said-
Puddles.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks
Pleasure.
again, Dan.
Congratulations on your project.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And now back to you.